Corey, thank you so much for joining me here on my podcast.
Pleasure.
I greatly appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this for a while, and I'm glad you can make time to come downtown and do this with me.
Likewise.
Cool. I always like to ask as a first question how you kind of get yourself set up for the day and get in the right mindset. I personally do nothing, which is really most people are learning a meditation practice in the morning to kind of get my mind in the right spot and get set up for the day. What about you? What's your routine?
For the past year or so, I've had a routine which is making coffee and oatmeal and playing chess for the first half hour after I wake up. But I've altered that recently, and I'm playing with something because I'm part of the Stegan Leadership Academy's Dragon's Gap program, which is kind of a spiritual program for leaders. And there's a lot of audio content in that program. And something I've started doing is seconds after I wake up, I will start listening to one of these audios and taking in spiritual wisdom before I have barriers up. And I've enjoyed it immensely.
Wow. Can you give me an example? What's something that you listen to? Some words of wisdom is what I'm asking.
Well, the past couple of days, there's all these assets in the program. Some are written, some are audio, some are video, and so obviously I gravitate to the audio for this. And the past couple of days, I've actually been listening to audios of past classes talking about hero's journey experiences. And one piece in particular that really caught my attention was a gentleman talking about the proactive as opposed to the reactive hero's journey. Sometimes life provokes, portions of our journey through intense moments or chaos or loss. And sometimes we accept the call to adventure amidst the hero's journey without that kind of provocation, which in my opinion, I've been exploring that also. So I hadn't heard someone else using that language, and it really stood out to me and was validating to hear someone else's expression of something I've been considering.
Is the hero's journey, when you're listening, are you relating that to yourself as how you show up in ways in life trying to be the hero?
Not from that. I wouldn't language it that way for myself. This whole program, the hero's journey, is a strong through line of it, and in many ways it's asking the question, what's the next call to adventure that the universe is offering you, and are you taking it? And so for myself, it is. I was having some resistance to the language of me as the hero, and in that equation.
Let me rephrase. And when I say me or you, I mean anybody.
Yeah.
Is that what it's questioning? Why are you meaning whoever you are, trying to be the hero?
I don't see it from the standpoint of why. There's, I think, more of a group assumption that as we're going through this, that it just is. We're all on a grand hero's journey. We're all on multiple minor hero's journeys, tangential journeys where we have to kind of veer off the big path in order to get treasure that we need to bring back to this quest, kind of a thing.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. So it's. Yeah, I'm not sure I entirely answered the question, but it's a lot of provocation and thought around that, but not necessarily the why piece.
Is part of the program doing this right when you wake up, or is this an adaptation that you're taking on?
Total adaptation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I've been talking a lot with people lately about when they wake up, what happens. And the thing that is pretty consistent is that the second they wake up, within a second, their mind just starts going. It's on. And I think it's interesting that before you let your mind go on, you're putting on headphones or listening to however you're doing it, you're bringing in learning right out of the gates. It's pretty cool. How have you noticed a shift at all since you've been doing that versus what you were doing with prior?
I think a big realization overall isn't necessarily particular to the timing of the day that I do this, but that I do it at some point. When I do it at some point every day, it always grounds me. It always slows me down, and then I find that I approach other occurrences throughout the day with more grace. I haven't studied this decision to do it in the morning long enough. I've been doing it maybe a week. Right. But so far, I'm just enjoying how receptive I am before the spinning starts. And it's a really interesting thing to wake up and reach for headphones within seconds, be listening to something. So I think I'm just kind of exploring that. And so far, I'm it's not to say that it's perfect or easy, right? I'm still maintaining focus and listening and dealing with distraction as I might, in any meditative practice.
Yeah.
I'm constantly bringing myself back to what I'm listening.
How long do you listen for?
They vary. I think the typical is 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Some have been 45. Some have been shorter. But I tried it. I think I've been intentional or not going at least 15 minutes.
And prior to that, when you were playing chess, was that a way to give your mind kind of like a workout or something first thing in the morning like that?
I don't know my reasoning necessarily, other than I enjoy chess. I play speed chess, so I play 10-minute games where each opponent has 5 minutes overall to play. And I like playing 2 or 3 games in the morning. I think maybe a part of the reason that I started doing it in the morning was I'm fresh in the morning and I play well in the morning. And if I don't play in the morning, I maybe never get to it. And it's something that is important to me to continue to cultivate.
Okay, got it. I'm fascinated by chess players. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm horrible at it, but I want to be good at it. And I get the feeling you're really good at it, just the way you're explaining it.
I'm fine. I play a lot.
Chess players seem so smart to me. It's like, what's going on in those heads?
I find that I do really poorly for a while, and then I really excel, and then I do poorly, and then I excel.
Why do you think that is? What is it about chess where you can go through that?
I'm not positive. What I notice about myself is, particularly during more challenging lifetimes, I'm more easily distractible.
Oh.
And when I'm in more of a state of grace, I can get further into the game, in which case I perform better.
Interesting. You said something, I like the term you used, during difficult lifetimes.
Sure.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you grew up in the Chicagoland area, is that right?
Suburbs of Chicago.
Yeah. And growing up, what kind of kid were you like?
I was a jokey kid because of what my mom went through when I was 5, and she was institutionalized for severe depression. I learned to make her laugh, to make my life brighter. And that carried over, I think, across the spectrum of my childhood after that. Avoider of conflict and entertainer. Yeah.
Did when you were 5 and your mom was institutionalized for this, did you have any understanding what exactly that meant?
Oh, no. No.
Did your father share with you on any level, try to explain what was going on with mom or why she was leaving? Or
I wouldn't be surprised if he tried. I don't have a recollection of that. I don't have a recollection of many deep conversations with my father when I was young, or any, actually. But we had things that we did together. He would take me fishing. Eventually, we got a boat. We go out on Lake Michigan together, and I remember the 6 a.m. totally calm, expansive lake in front of us with the sun rising, and that was our experience together and our connection together. He might have tried to explain something like that, but I wouldn't necessarily have said that was his forte back then.
Did you like going fishing with him?
I did. I don't do it now. And he's started fishing again, and I've been resisting going. I have a slightly different relationship with animals than I did back then.
Oh.
But back then, I enjoyed the peace and the tranquility, and also the rockiness sometimes, and the unpredictability. I got to drive the boat when I was young sometimes. So I certainly have fond memories. Few are related to actually catching fish.
You said you liked the rocky conditions to a certain extent. Is that upon reflection, or I'm like wondering?
Yeah.
I'm correlating it to what was going on, or
Yeah, you just brought me right back into a moment of when the waves are choppy and the boat's cruising and it slams over and over again. You brought me back into the queasiness of that experience in your question. So I don't think I always enjoyed it at the time. And I remember the phrase "tossing your cookies." Like we tossed some cookies.
That's great. Did you have siblings?
One sister.
Yeah. And what's your age difference?
2.5 years older than me.
2.5 years older. Okay. And is she still in your life? And
she is.
Okay. Yeah. Close by?
She's in Colorado.
In Colorado? Oh, no kidding. Whereabouts?
She's in Boulder.
Oh. Okay. Interesting. Do you get out to visit there much?
Not too much. I've been there twice in the past 3 years, I think.
Yeah. And at what point did your mom was she able to come out of the institution? And
she was. We're starting to deal. She's faced depression primarily her entire adult life, and we're going through a new range of stuff with her right now. She has very severe rheumatoid arthritis, and we just discovered like a week ago that she's self-medicating using different substances, alcohol, weed, and pills. And so we did a full-on intervention with her just this past weekend.
Wow.
Yeah, and she, God bless her, she's very receptive. I think I get a lot of my personality from her. And when back in 2004, when my relationship with my now wife was new, and she discovered that I had been smoking pot to the degree that I had in LA, she gave me a flat ultimatum. She's a psychologist who works with kids at an alternative school. Like, that was not going to fly.
Yeah.
And I needed that. I needed someone to love me enough to hold a firm boundary. And I feel like my mother receives us in a very similar way. And we'll see how that plays out. But back then, that was about a year-long period, is my understanding of her. I talk about it as her light went out. She had a very bright light that shone primarily on me. And then for a year, it was darkness. And then it came back on bright as ever.
When she came back home, the light was brighter than ever? Okay, and does that mean she had her wits about her, so to speak?
Yeah, it took so she was institutionalized for a month, but it was, I think, a year of rockiness because they had to find the right mix of medication to support her depression. And I said, about a year later, they found that, and she seemed to be the person she had been before.
Okay.
And in our family, that meant nothing had happened. Let's set that aside and just keep moving forward. Yeah.
And so you're 6 or 7-ish at this point.
6 years old.
So now, and your parents were together still? Okay. And are they still together?
They just celebrated 50 years together.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So as you're growing up, mom's in a good spot, dad's in a good spot, assuming he is. Okay. And what about when you got into those formidable years, the teen years? What were you like in kind of the end of junior high school? What kind of student were you? What kind of kid were you?
I was an amplified version of that 6-year-old who came out of that year. Didn't want to rock the boat, knew how to navigate eggshells, entertained people, knew how to please people in order to keep things safe. And so I was merely an amplified version of that. That meant I got good grades. I was a good boy. I didn't take a single drink in high school.
Interesting.
And participated in high school. I was in theater and choir, and my mom had wanted to be an actor or a musician when she was young, so I was continuing that whole process of keeping mom elated by pursuing that. And
were you happy doing? I mean,
I enjoyed it.
You did enjoy
I
it.
did enjoy
Okay.
it until I didn't.
Okay. Okay. What did your dad do during all this, by the way? What was his job?
My dad owned a number of home and car audio stores.
Okay.
Nothing like what I've done with my life, right? Very, very practical, straightforward. Back in the day, maybe that was even considered tech to a degree, like
For sure.
before computers, right?
Yeah.
Outfitting your car,
Yep.
right? And your
So
stereo
true.
system.
Yeah,
and,
that
and
was a
whatnot
big
at
deal.
home. Yeah, so that was his world, and he was a workaholic. Yeah, so I had a much stronger relationship with my mother, and then I had this kind of connective tissue with my dad, which was like going out on the boat. But certainly she was light and nothing compared to her until I'd say junior high, late junior high, and then early high school when I started being interested in girls, and I liked being the center of other people's universe in a very similar way.
And that bothered her? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay.
No, my mother really liked most of my girlfriends.
Okay. Oh, she was the light in your until you were getting interested in women.
Yeah, she was
Oh,
really
I'm
the
sorry.
only light that I knew.
I see.
And then I sought the light of other women.
I gotcha. Yeah, at that age, that's a big game changer too.
Yeah.
So, and you got involved with theater, and to what extent were you like at the forefront of the productions that were being put on, or were you on the, in the cast, or, where were you in that?
So I did choir, I did show choir, and I did theater, and some musical theater, and I was in theater. I would quickly rise to the top. In musical theater, I was less confident with my voice in a solo fashion. Loved singing in choir. I did play Teen Angel in Greece our senior year in high school, and loved that. And that was really fun. I had wanted the lead, but actually I think at the end of the day that like I was well suited for the role that I got, and I had a blast doing it. And that, my parents came to everything that I did, and my mother made sure my dad came to everything that I did. And then I continued that in college. For some reason, I thought I was going to go study Japanese and be a Japanese translator for like 2 months. And the university that I ended up going to had that program. But over the summer, I was like, I should probably give this theater thing a try. And what I did was essentially manipulate the system, because by entering the theater program right before starting school, I avoided the audition process. And they didn't audition me for like 3-4 months into the program, and by then I don't even think they did.
Did you know that you were doing that?
No, it was not intentional.
Oh.
It was subconsciously strategic, maybe, at best.
Okay.
No, I really thought this whole Japanese thing was like this fascinating ticket.
Yeah.
I really don't know where the heck that came from.
That's interesting. I was going to ask you, where did that come from?
I mean, I had worked at Taco Bell when I was young, right? I had worked at Taco Bell when I was young. I loved Spanish. I really enjoyed. I worked with this one Mexican family at our Taco Bell. Like, it was all one family. They all lived in one apartment, and they were the most lovely human beings. I adored them. I fell in love with one of the young girls, right? Like that whole thing. And so I think language had captured me. No idea why the whole Japanese thing came up. I've tried to pinpoint that and can't figure it out.
And I remember reading at some point that you really enjoyed working at Taco Bell.
I did.
But then there was a moment that happened. Can you share that?
Are you speaking of my thieving ways or something else?
That actually, I know that I was going to come to, but I was actually thinking maybe it wasn't Taco Bell, but somebody didn't treat you with dignity is how I remember it. Am I getting it
Oh,
wrong?
when I got spit in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one, right? Yeah, working the drive-through and some teenagers, I handed them their food and I got a big loogie right in the face.
And why does that stick out so? I mean, obviously it's something that would, but what about it sticks out for you? And kind of now that you can look back on it.
I mean, it's so humiliating. That was so humiliating. Particularly probably because I felt like this place was my family and it was safe. And it was partly, I think, because of this experience I'd gone through with my mom when I was young. I've always had rose-colored glasses on. And whenever those get ripped off my face, it's a shocking experience for me. And that was one of the first early moments where someone swatted those off and said, the world ain't always like that, kiddo.
When that happened, take me into your brain. Like you got hit. Did you say, like, what the, or did you want to run outside? Did you go tell somebody, or?
No, I think for the most part I froze. I definitely went into shock. Right, when the glasses come off, that's my first reaction. Like my wife knows if we're in a movie theater and there's a shooter, like she's got to tackle me to the ground because, like we're well aware. I have a freeze function amidst shocking moments, and back then I think I would have. I think I froze. I think I collapsed. Emotionally and likely physically, I'll bet I looked smaller. I wouldn't be surprised if I didn't tell anybody else what happened. Quietly cleaned up and probably carried that with me for several days, just as a weight on my back. And the weight being this awareness of the world, and I didn't understand mean people. I still don't understand meanness.
I was wondering, when I was thinking about our conversation prior to, I was wondering why and at what point getting spit on became something that was disrespectful. Did you ever think about that?
Interestingly, the spit is one piece. As I reflect back on it, the intention, there was an intensity. Like it was a convertible. I don't know these kids. I don't know who they were. They were older than me. But in my recollection, there was a boy who kind of, sat up and leaned in, and I hear the, of a good, like someone who knows how to spit a loogie, right? Like as kids, we practice that stuff,
That's
right?
That's true.
You don't want to be a sissy spitter, and right, and it was a good one. And so there's the sound. But mostly, I think it's the intensity with which it came at me. The residue is an after effect. I think it was mostly the intensity of the energy that was coming at me, and I learned about energy as a 5-year-old when I had to read it real carefully, in order to know if I was safe around my mom. So I was absorbing all of whatever energy that was. I felt that more than I felt probably. The loogie.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting. When you were in theater, both in high school and college, was there any performance that was more memorable, like one that sticks in your mind, one or two?
Yeah, there are many. I did a lot of performing. High school, I had a kind of a star role in this show called The Whole Darn Shooting Match. and I played an advertising executive who used to be creative, he used to strip off all his clothes except his underwear and walk around the ledge of the building. And there was something about making, like, that was probably the first time I really made people howl with laughter. So that was really striking for me. I liked instigating emotion in other people, particularly positive emotion. And then in college, there were a couple of roles. We did Fiddler on the Roof in an auditorium for 2,000 people, and that was a real rush. And we did it so well, and we didn't know we were going to do it well until opening night, because our lead was my roommate freshman year, and this was sophomore year now. We had a cast full of sophomores for a main stage production, which was unheard of. Like, a bunch of us got big roles. And Artevia, my former roommate, was very hit and miss in the role. And then opening night, he just lit it up. And the whole, like, cast, we all relaxed together and just standing ovation every night. Such a rush. So that was a big one. And then my junior year, I did a Sam Shepard play called The Tooth of Crime, where I played an aging rock star. And it's a metaphorical piece. It's an aging rock star, and then there's the new rock star who's, like, coming in with rap. And my female roommate at the time played my nemesis, and we were really close, and we just had great chemistry. And so we're doing these battles, and I'm singing as a rock star, and she's coming back at me as a rapper. And we did it in this, it was the head of the theater department and the head of the music department coming together for this production. And I'm singing rock and roll. And as I mentioned earlier, like, my confidence with singing was, so this was really a challenge, but fun. We'd go out every night with the cast, and sometimes with the director or other members of the faculty, and we'd drink and smoke together. Like, we felt like we were rock stars during the production. And we did it in this, like, underground industrial building, and they bust in all the blue hairs, and it was a blast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. At the end of it, I put a gun in my mouth and blow my head off, and then, like, shout a shotgun backstage. And I remember the moment of lift and fall.
Wow.
It was intense, but
Jeez.
that was one of the performances I've had in my life where I felt like the character.
Do you, when you had to walk around the stage in your underwear, was that a new experience for you? Like, to be in your underwear in front of all these people?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't
problem?
think I'd done. Well, that's not true. My wife, I went to high school with. She does have a picture of me at a party with a bra on my head, I think. So I was silly. Like, I like to be a goofy kid. But certainly, I mean, this was a new way of, doing that in front of an auditorium full of people was maybe an elevated version of what I liked to do with friends, like, in terms of goofiness.
Yeah. So that did not deter you?
No, that was this is me. Like,
oh, okay.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No. No, and as you may be aware, you probably, I think you've seen it, that I go on to do this naked basketball commercial.
Right.
I mean, it's part of my trajectory, I guess, taking off my clothes in front of audiences. Who knew?
It just got you prepped. It totally got you prepped.
I'd never put that together. I love it.
Well, you jumped ahead of me, because I was going to get that later. I'm really bummed out right now. I had that so worked out.
Yeah, I'm going to force
there
you
was
to
gonna
lose
be a
any
moment.
agenda you have.
Oh, okay. So you went to Wheeling College, right?
Wheeling High School.
Wheeling High School.
Wheeling is my high school.
Okay. What was the college name?
Millikan University.
Millikan, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Millikan. And I was curious, I was trying to figure out what was drawing you to Millikan.
So much of my life has been kind of following the path that I believe is set before me. So I was not a kid who went out and investigated a bunch of different universities. Millikan came to our school, and I sat with that person, and I trusted whoever that person was. I don't remember if it was a man or woman, but it was enough of an impact on me that I felt like the path was just being set out. So, okay, well, I like how this feels. I'll go there. And the Japanese thing came up, and then, you know, obviously they happened to have one of the top theater programs in the country, but I didn't, maybe subconsciously I was aware of that, but it was not in the forefront of my mind.
When you were a junior, senior, whenever they came to school,
I think they came, yeah, they must have came when I was a junior.
when you say the path, were you thinking that way then, or do you look back on it and say, that's...
Oh, yeah, I look back on it and say that I was not
yeah.
aware. In some ways, I have some embarrassment around some of that, like the fact that I never, I didn't tend to, like, I didn't know what I want and went after it. I typically waited for the path to unfold. Like, I didn't know I was going to join choir. I gained a friend who I really liked and admired, and he was in choir. And so, like, I tend to follow that, and I still do that now. But now I don't do it with any embarrassment or guilt. I actually think it's an asset now. But around the past, I didn't. For some reason, I don't have that same feeling for myself around how I followed my trajectory earlier on.
Why do you think you felt that way?
Maybe in comparison to other people who seemed to be so directed and know exactly what they want, or people that I would come across who knew what they wanted, fought hard for it, and like just did amazing things early on. Comparison.
Yeah. I always wondered, you know, why we had to have such a defined path. I think I struggled with that too in college. And you and I have similar stories about college, a little different in that you had somebody come in and it was, you know, I guess they were recruiting people or, you know, talking. And do you ever think about this person, man or woman, you couldn't remember, they like kind of changed the trajectory of your life in that 1 hour or 45 minutes that they sat with you? How cool would it be if you ran into them? What do you think you'd say?
I'd be fascinated.
What would you say?
I mean, I'd likely ask questions. I'm a question asker, so I'd be curious to know if, like, why were they at my school? Do they have any recollection of me being in the room?
Yeah.
Was it, you know, just another day at work for them in the same way that it was another day at school for me, but it happened to be a direction-changing day without me realizing it. There are plenty of people at Millikan at the university that I recognize who had profound trajectory impact on my life. When I think about it, most of them, it was over time, and this was probably an hour, right? And so, but it had as much impact, but I can't correlate the experience other than I must have trusted enough. Because I'm a very energetic person, so something about that person must have felt comfortable and safe to me. Yeah, and that's why I pursued that path.
Those that did sort of help guide you along your journey, do you ever reach out to them, or do you have any relationships with them still?
My favorite professor ever was a gentleman named Dr. Graham Provan, and he's since passed away. But before he did, he got a letter from me.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Oh, he had a bit really. He was a professor of history, and he was the guy that most every other student hated because he was so tough, brutally tough. He would call people out if you didn't do your work, like you were going to hear it in front of the whole class. And so he had a reputation, and so like students loved to complain about him. And when I took his class, it was the most loved I'd ever felt by a professor.
Because he was so demanding?
Because he believed that all of us had potential, but I felt it, you know, one-on-one with him in a classroom setting, and it was a lecture class. Most of my theater classes were 10 to 20 people, and this was probably 70, 80 people.
Okay.
Somewhere in that vicinity. And yet I felt special in that classroom. I think I would say I also felt like he thought everyone in that classroom was special. But I felt, even though I rarely had individual interaction with him, I felt a one-on-one relationship. I felt important. I felt that he was holding me to my highest potential, and I liked the fear of the standards. I liked that I didn't want to look like a fool, and so I worked hard. Like there was something about that was really appealing. So yeah, years.
What did you write to him?
I remember I sent him a card, and I wanted to be direct and say that he had a profound influence on my life, and that I've never felt so loved by a professor. And I think I graduated in '96, so I probably sent that to him a decade later, and he passed away like another 3 years after that.
Did you hear back from him?
I did.
You did?
I did.
No
yeah.
kidding?
Yeah, he sent me a note back.
What did he say?
Of gratitude.
Wow.
For sharing that, and I don't remember what he shared beyond that, but I got something back that professed gratitude for that I was impacted and able to acknowledge it.
When you were going through Millikan, did you feel like you wanted to become a professional actor?
Oh yeah, it's the only thing that made sense. Yeah.
And were you aware? But just, I don't want to assume you were aware, but let's just say you were. How hard that is, but yet you wanted to go for it anyway, or?
I rationalized.
What is the I'm always curious about that, because everyone says, but what are the rationalizations that one goes through?
Freshman, the data. Freshman year, I was in more shows than any other freshman. Junior year, I won the major acting award that the university offers. Like, I was a big fish in a small pond.
Yeah.
Right. Did well there, and just thought it would be easy. I really believed that it didn't make any sense to me that it would be challenging. It certainly was, and it changed me in ways that were not healthy for me. But I had no idea. I didn't know where I would end up. I was attracted more, I think, to LA, and then an opportunity came along once again. Some friends were going to LA, and one of them was in Virginia. I was in Portland at the time. I moved to Portland for 6 months after I graduated because I just wanted to get out of the theater scene and do something totally different.
Wow.
I was kind of burnt out. But this friend said, I will drive from Virginia to Portland to pick you up if you want to go to LA. Some of our friends are going there. And there was the path. And I accepted that invitation. He came and got me, and we drove down. And it was...
Had you ever been to LA before?
No, I don't believe so.
Oh, okay. Just back up to Portland real quick.
Yeah.
What were you doing there?
So I managed a Jewish delicatessen that originally I started off as the just as counter help, and I figured I would get some jobs, take a break, and then start entering the Portland theater scene. But the path was laid out for me there too. A guy who had graduated the year before, 3 months before my graduation, was like, "Hey, I'm going to Portland. You should come with me." And I followed that invitation. Pattern. And
when you get these invitations, is there any part of you that is a little fact-findy? Like, do you check out Portland?
No, I'm terrible.
Okay,
in
Portland
many ways,
sounds good.
Look, I've accepted some invitations in the past few years that I love, that I never did any investigating.
Yeah.
When someone that I trust and admire says I should do something, I really try to do it. And I never had a name for that, but I had a client a few years ago who called it the Yellow Brick Road.
Oh.
So I've really gravitated to that. I do too. And he also calls it Follow the Invite. So back then, the invite was to Portland. Did little to no investigation, showed up in Portland, got this job, ended up being promoted in the first 2 weeks to an assistant manager because I'm responsible. And I'm an intuitive leader. I always liked motivating other people. So the owner was this Jewish dude, older Jewish guy that, again, other people couldn't stand because he's tough. He was not a conscious leader in that regard. He was a yeller. Everyone was always pissing him off.
Oh, that's cool.
But for some reason, he liked me, and so I got promoted to assistant manager. And then because of my previous thieving days, when I was going through the books, I spotted the manager stealing from him and let him know. And he said, there's no way that's possible. And I showed him how he was doing it. And we sat down with the manager who denied it, but then who resigned and left.
Wow.
And then I was the manager of this Jewish delicatessen. And this guy like thought I was like, he started treating me like his kid, like I was going to inherit this business one day. So eventually when the opportunity to leave and go to LA came, that was a tough conversation.
I bet.
And I bullshitted through it. I said that I totally fabricated, just out of my own guilt, I didn't have the tools yet to have a totally honest conversation. So I told them that we had an opportunity already in LA and it was something I couldn't say no to. And that made it easier for everyone to accept that in 2 weeks I would be gone.
Have you ever contacted him since you left?
No, I have not. I've thought about it. Didn't get very far.
You mentioned your thieving days, so
Yeah.
we might as well just explain what all happened with that. Can you tell that story?
Sure. So at Taco Bell, and usually I don't name the fast food restaurant, but there it is. Just say a prominent fast food chain. Not hard to find that. That's the connection. But I was working cash register. I was a drive-through guy. Like that was my main gig. I loved working on the line. I actually really liked food prep. I thought it was fun, but they didn't let me do it that often for whatever reason. So I was often, on the drive-through. And as a smart kid, I didn't have to make a lot. I didn't make a lot of errors on the register. And they had a 2% margin of error before a manager started talking to an employee. And that meant that I had wiggle room because I didn't make mistakes. And the way that their system at the time worked, an order goes in on one side and travels to the other side, like a row of cars. Like, so a new order comes in and then something pushes the next one forward. And then by the time it gets to the window, it's in the front position. And if you make deletions in the front position, that's where they count. So I could listen to someone, change their mind over and over again before I even touched the keyboard. So if someone changed their mind, it wasn't going to reflect in my percent margin of error. So I made very few errors, and that meant that I had that wiggle room, and I took advantage of it. I would enter an order on the right side, and if there was no other car, I would just let it sit there, and then I would delete it after I handed them their food and they gave me the money. So it never made it to the reporting phase. And a 2% lunch rush, $1,000 lunch rush, it's $20 in my pocket at a time when I'm making $5 an hour.
Yeah.
Back in the late 80s, early 90s. And so I was bumping my pay 50% tax-free every time I did that. And I did it a lot.
So first of all, is that something that really smart kids could mainly figure out? Like that seems like you really had that thought through. The 2%, I mean, because you kind of had to pay attention to making sure you didn't go over 2%, or
it was all intuitive. I wasn't keeping logs.
I feel like you had a sense, though.
Yeah. I'm a good numbers person.
Yeah.
I did AP calculus in high school. I don't remember any of it now, but I did it and I really enjoyed it. Like so numbers came easy to me. So I think I was intuitively keeping a certain track without, like I certainly wasn't writing down and keeping 100% accuracy. But I was pretty comfortable with it, and I probably was pretty brash at certain points. And I was also really well liked there. I never got into trouble, right? Which to some degree you could say I used to my advantage.
Yeah. Okay. Did you need the money, or was it more of a thrill, or like a gaming it?
Well, now you're getting into some good money stuff, right?
Okay. So, what's your relationship with money?
Yeah. Which is my favorite vulnerability is sexy game card. Favorite one. What's your relationship
with money? That's crazy, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, that I picked that one.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's absolutely my favorite card.
Okay, cool.
Grew up in a traditional Jewish home where like there's just issues of money. Some families who survived the Holocaust. My father's mother, when she passed away and we were cleaning out her condo, there were the remnants, the ends of bars of soap everywhere.
Jeez.
Everywhere. So the way that she hoarded soap, I think, was similar to the way our family approached money. Like, you have to hoard it. And I come from a family where if you ever are complimented on anything, the immediate response is what a deal you got on it. Right? And so the relationship with money has always been complicated. We've always had enough, but not a lot of extra. And so as a kid, I felt like, look, my mother made me feel like I was incredibly special, and yet I didn't have a bank account that reflected that. And so there was this feeling that I deserved more than I had. And so that was, I think, in some ways, my subconscious way of validating my specialness by like, essentially believing it was owed to me. Like, I was that good an employee that I was rationalizing myself as underpaid, and I was therefore bringing that into equilibrium on my own.
So was that Taco Bell's, when you say your bank account wasn't reflecting how special you were, are you saying Taco Bell wasn't paying me my full worth? Or was there a relationship with money where you were saying to yourself, consciously or subconsciously, I don't have enough money, I'm not special, I'm only kind of special?
I think both of those things are accurate.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, the Holocaust and how many generations it's affected is really an interesting thing to me. The way you tell that story about the soap. And I've heard so many stories that are like that, but different, if you know what I mean. How do you think that is affecting your generation now of Jewish people that have, have had family members or whatnot go through the Holocaust, or some connection, obviously, even just, it being in their realm?
I think whether it's generational trauma or an individual trauma, there's a tendency, in my experience, because we explore a lot of this with our own clients. In my experience, there is either a complete adoption of the resulting belief system or a rejection of it. And for me, I adopted it for a period of time in my life, and then there came a point when I owned a business and had gotten further into RTC, where I broke from it. And in my experience, I experienced my sister as maintaining the previous belief system. She is fiercely protective of her retirement account, has been, I think, since the first job she had. She worked at Taco Bell before I did. The path was set, follow the path. I've never articulated all that either. It's like kind of silly how this truly is my pattern.
Yeah.
And so, but she works, a more traditional, she works for somebody else, works for a hospital system as a physical therapist. She's brilliant at what she does, but she's on a trajectory where, like, she's super protective over her future. And I let go of all of that a few years into RTC, where I started being less outcome-based and less motivated by fear around money, and started creating an abundance mentality. And it was really healthy for me. And sometimes I worry that it's not healthy for my sister to hold on to the previous one, but I also recognize that has value as well.
And just for the record, RTC is Roundtable Companies. That's your company.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I want to come back to the money piece of this when you let go, and we could go down a whole thing, and I want to.
Sure.
But just to stay a little chronological, so you followed the yellow brick road to LA with your buddy who picks you up from Virginia, and now you're going to hopefully be a big time actor or something, right? Is that what you're thinking? Big time, or are you thinking, can I just make a living doing it?
Oh no, big time.
Big time.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I felt, as a golden child, right? Like I truly believed I was supposed to do something magnificent, and acting was the only vehicle that made sense. And I did not believe that I believed I was supposed to be famous, but so that I could do something, not just to be famous. I felt like I was supposed to contribute something. I didn't know what that was yet, but I felt like I would need the platform. And this was the only trajectory that made sense. So my storytelling was always that was my destiny. And I was good at it. And of my friends, I was the most successful to a point until, as I was leaving, other people started surpassing me, other people who were more mentally healthy because I sunk my own ship in many regards. I started getting in my own way. When as a people pleaser, I started becoming what I thought LA wanted me to be in order to help me get where I want to go, and I lost myself in that, and hit my own form of depression in that, self-medicated with pot, and ultimately really lost track of the person I had been. And leaving was incredibly healthy for me when I finally did, 2005-ish.
2005.
Yeah.
So how many years were you there?
Almost a decade. I moved out in '96.
Wow. And you did you start by doing voiceovers?
No, I started doing. Let me think. I did some light extra work just to be on sets, and then got an agent and started going out on auditions, and got my SAG eligibility by working 8 days on Fight Club, which was a blast and just a fascinating memory. Brad Pitt was incredibly kind, Meatloaf was freaking hilarious, and Ed Norton was method acting, and he was a total and complete jackass. And I can't hold that against him because he was method acting, and so he was a lunatic on set, very unkind to people, but I recognize it was part of his process. I did not recognize that at the time. I was like, this guy's a freaking jerk. What's the deal? But in retrospect, I understand. But being on that set for 8 days with David Fincher, and I would sit behind the monitors and watch him direct. And
what were you doing?
I was one of the space monkeys, was what we were called. We all shaved our heads, and we were the crew that would go out. We were making the soap, and we were in the fight scenes down below. I'm in the fight scene when Angel gets his nose busted open, and so it was fascinating to be around that serious an environment. And then that made me eligible to get into the union. And I had gotten that by writing the casting director and saying, I really feel like I'm here for a reason. I need someone to help me to get eligible to get into the union. And this casting director responded and gave me that gift, which was incredibly kind.
Jeez.
Incredibly kind.
Do you remember that person's name?
I don't. I should look that up. Because I had many relationships with casting directors after that, but I don't think I ever worked with that person again. But then after that, the first day that I booked a job, I booked two, actually. I booked the Mountain Dew commercial that would end up being a Super Bowl spot, and then I booked a very small part on Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And so I had to call my parents and be like, I need $1,200 to join the union.
Okay.
Can you help me out? Because I did not have it. And they helped me out, got into the union, and then I started kind of my more professionalized trajectory, which primarily was commercials and then small parts in television shows, and then started doing some voiceover stuff, which was probably my favorite overall. Voiceover stuff's a blast.
Oh, you like it? Okay. So as you're telling the story, I'm wondering, are you happy with your agent right now? Are you getting mad at him? Are you like, don't send me that kind of work. I'm supposed to be the lead in the, next whatever.
So it was a relatively confusing time because I certainly didn't go out to be a commercial actor.
Yeah.
And yet it was still fun for a while. You get treated very well. On the Mountain Dew set, we're working on 20th Century Fox with the director Sam Bayer, who did Smells Like Teen Spirit, their music video, which is like iconic.
Jeez.
There's 300 extras, and I'm a primary player, not an extra. There's egos getting fed like crazy. I've got my Hollywood trailer. I'm making friends with the other guys. One of them who does like tons of Mountain Dew spots, and so I just this, it definitely fed me in that regard. And yet there comes a point where I have to ask the question of why is this not translating into other areas of success, primarily when I did that Naked commercial, and every commercial agent wanted me. It was a huge hit in the commercial world, and yet it was great for the careers of the producer and the writer and the director of that spot, but it didn't really make a difference in my life other than the fact that there had been a big strike and my agent tried to keep everyone employed and ended up going out of business. She was a smaller agent. And so then I had to go out and actually shop a new agent. And and that served me well because I was sought after by the top two, and went with one of them and continued to book commercial gigs. But then Along Came Polly comes out, where they really created a scene very similar to our basketball commercial. And then Nike does this spot where a guy's running naked through the football field, right? So we whether it's correlated or not, I don't know whether it's subconscious or real, whatever. But I'm seeing things happening, but not to me.
Yeah.
I'm still Corey. What's going on here?
Yeah.
And that was the start of a downward spiral for me, and a lot of confusion that manifested in ways that were less than healthy.
I'm thinking about, so you're like the main person on the Mountain Dew commercial, and it's like feeding you, as you say, but then is it almost a correlation to like a minor league versus a major league? Like, could you imagine being the main person on a major motion picture and what that must feel like versus being the main person on a Mountain Dew commercial?
At the time, especially when we figured out that we think this is a Super Bowl spot. They're spending a fortune on this.
Yeah.
The amount of money they must have paid just for the song to adapt the Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. That felt for a while like the top. That really did. I couldn't compare it to being a lead in a television show or in a major motion picture, but to me that was the path to get there.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Like, it just made sense. And when it didn't correlate, and when eventually I learned that the industry is entirely siloed, and the people that I was building relationships with typically were not the people who were hiring in the other arena. I didn't know that. So I thought that it was all working according to plan at that point. And the Super Bowl thing was, I didn't think I could go down from there. It was only going to get better.
Right. Did you get paid well for that?
I did. It was
like, what does somebody get paid to be the main person on?
There were four main guys, because we modeled the Queen Bohemian Rhapsody video. So there's four of us, and I took the high note, which I think it made me special, as I stood out in the commercial for that.
You did your singing.
I did, man. And I think that's what got me hired. Like, I think I was the only one in the auditions who was playing that guy.
Oh, that's great.
And so, yes, I got paid well because it was a national spot. It was a real mind screw, because you earn your day rate filming, and then everything else is left out of your control. It's totally up to chance. It's relative to how often does it air, and where does it air.
Oh.
So I got paid one rate for cable, for basic cable, that was like a smaller lump sum, but the real money is any time it would play national network, which is probably less of a big deal now because people consume in so many different ways. But back then, I think it was on average $500 for every national airing, and so there would be strings of days in a row that felt like weeks on end, where every day I went to the mailbox and there were thousands of dollars in the mail. So what I learned through the commercial process was try to make a living off of my day rates, and then all of the extra that you couldn't count on, but when it showed up, it was a big deal. All of that was to invest in my career. And so that was the money I used to eventually take a whole group of people up to Mammoth and start my first storytelling company. Right? So it all, and in essence, RTC now, we have a publishing division of our company that in essence duplicates that model. Once something's published, it earns revenue and you don't have to do a whole lot anymore. So I've always looked at those kinds of revenue streams because I want free money in the mail. It was a seriously addictive. You don't want that to slow down. It's such a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
And when it happens day after day, and you eventually it just starts getting ridiculous.
Yeah. When it's going to air on the Super Bowl, do you have a party or something?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
I got my face smashed in a cake.
And then were you ever out after that, and say you were at a bar or something and you just happened to look up and you're like, $500?
Yes, and like everyone who knows you is letting you know everywhere it airs.
I saw your
like,
commercial.
Yes, and you start like you start asking like so like there are lookouts.
Yeah.
Because there's also this mistrust. Am I going to be compensated appropriately?
Oh.
And it's valid. It's so valid, especially at this time. There were, as the internet was starting to become popular. This was the first commercial, to my knowledge, that ever showed in a movie theater. This commercial.
Wow.
I don't believe we were paid for that because there was nowhere in the contract, right? So they looped it into something else. I don't think we got any kind of significant money. That we were also, I found out that it was playing in the Caribbean islands, and supposedly they had found a loophole, and we weren't getting compensated for that. So then, once the internet blew up, advertisers were trying to figure out how to take advantage of that. So it's just natural business stuff. People are looking for loopholes that aren't, necessarily conscious and trying to figure out how to make sure everyone's adequately compensated. They're trying to leverage their IP. So I had my spies, so to speak. I mean, my Naked commercial would show up on best commercial ever programs, right? And I had to fight for one of them to actually make sure that we got compensated for that, because one of them was just not paying people for that.
So you were starting to learn big time the business behind all this,
Sure.
and not just the notoriety, and it must fuel you to a certain extent to be, in front of the camera like this, and people seeing you and saying they're seeing you and stuff, that famous thing you were talking about. But now there's a business behind it in the reality of that.
And I love that part. I really was fascinated when I started the storytelling company. I very quickly recognized that I was going to need to understand legal documents, entertainment law. And the way that I taught myself at least a modicum of entertainment law is I bought a thick book, and I sat at my computer and I typed out every contract in that book. And there came a point in the typing it out process where I started to, like at the beginning, it was just gobbledygook. And then I started to understand.
Is that why you were doing it?
Oh, yeah.
You consciously said, the way I'm going to learn this is just type it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I think initially I started doing it because I needed a contract, and through the process of typing out one in the book, because there wasn't an online version, I had to type it out if I was going to use it.
Yeah.
And then I recognized that it was really furthering my understanding, so I just started.
Yeah.
teaching myself.
So when you started to kind of spiral down, you mentioned you smoked pot all the time. What was going on? Why were you in that state?
That was a good one. You can use that for sound
we got the
effects
sound,
the confusion over there was expectation. Expectation gets you every time. When I started doing the projects that were getting more notoriety, and my life wasn't seemingly being impacted, but I was watching other people who were involved be impacted, there was disappointment. And that disappointment was in direct conflict with my understanding of my specialness in the world. So the pot became a replacement, self-medicating good feeling. And over time, I became a functional high. Not the nicest version of me, because come 3 p.m. after I've already smoked 4 or 5 times that day, I start to get burnt out and be a jerk, and probably not fun to be around or work with. In the morning, I was probably really fun, right? But over time, I was becoming bitter. And meanwhile, I put together that first company and had a whole range of experiences that we came up with this concept. We raised some money. One of the producers was willing to put in some money, and we shot our first short film on 35mm film with an award-winning crew. We convinced, I was good at putting together a great package and selling an idea. And so we got a bunch of super talented people who worked half the year, typically. Award-winning cinematographer, full stunt crew that worked in television on major projects. When they weren't working, they were looking for cool stuff to do. They want to keep themselves busy. And so we brought together a great crew of people, shot this great little film. And those first 9 people that I had brought together and taken to Mammoth, became this company of people. But I fell in love with one of them, and she was married. And I truly believed in that equation that I was the hero. She was seemingly unhappy in her marriage. But we kept it secret, and it was very fiery and very exciting, and I felt like it was a profound love in my life because it had such high stakes to it. But eventually it was found out, and then everything fell apart, and I lost the trust of the people that I had pulled together. Some of them rallied behind me, some of them rallied in another direction, some were caught in between, and it just became way more drama than people could handle, and that company dissolved. And then she went back to her husband, as she should have, eventually. And I thought that we were going to be together for the rest of my life. I'd committed. I was ready to marry this woman. And so everything falling apart was like 3 months of total devastation and recovery. And then I tried again and built another team, and we were going to go out and shoot another film, and went out and made a musical comedy short film, and we're about to take that on the festival circuit. And I did a variation of the same thing, not with a married woman, but with my co-producer and the financier and leading actress, and I was the director. Like, it was so cliche. And I wrote it, All the Trust Again, and that fell apart. And she felt betrayed in that experience.
Okay, so we just stopped for a minute because my daughter, I was just sharing with you, my daughter came in from Indiana University to come visit me since I was here in Chicago, and we're going to spend the weekend together. So we stopped the camera, and I got so messed up, I can't remember what we were talking about.
I was talking about my romantic interludes that blew up my previous companies.
You were the director, and you were, okay.
Yeah, so I was learning lessons that I needed to learn about the creative process and how to not implode trust. And also, a big lesson that I needed to learn at the time was the difference between creative energy and romantic energy. And I was so involved in the creative process and so stimulated by it that it was very easy for me to mistake creative energy for love. But this person that I co-produced this second film with, I led her to believe that it was real, and then the project ended and it faded. And when it faded, she felt incredibly betrayed, understandably. And so that whole thing imploded. She wanted nothing to do with me anymore. So that was the second time I had worked to help create a really pinnacle piece of work. It was a strong piece of work, and yet I had done something to betray the process, and then everyone wanted to shelve it and move on with their life because I had created enough havoc. And those lessons are so instrumental to my journey, and they were so necessary. They were painful, and I lost friends, and I hurt people, and I hurt a family, right? But they were pivotal in terms of me getting to a point where I could learn how to survive that.
When you had the affair, is that okay to say?
Yeah.
And I'm really just trying to understand, so please know this comes with no judgment whatsoever. Sure. Was there anything inside of you that said, I shouldn't be doing this, or there's another person on the other side of this, and there's maybe the respect for the union or something along those lines? Or just, I'm kind of curious what goes on with a person when they're in that kind of scenario.
Well, I can only have to speak for myself, but for me it was pretty complete and utter blindness. I had convinced myself of my heroic piece in the equation. The gentleman, the husband, was the villain in the story. The uncaring man who didn't pay attention to her, and she deserved better. And I was so blind that there was a period of time where she moved out of the house, and I would go and hang out with her at this apartment that she got, and her son came over at one point, like 18-year-old son, and I was so blinded in my head, it was like, oh, we're going to be friends. Like, that's the degree to which the power of my narrative was strong.
When you're an actor, do you, in a sense, even in your life, sort of get a adrenaline rush or endorphin rush from, all this kind of stuff? Like being almost on stage is kind of a thrill. Doing something like that might be, in a sense, a little bit of a thrill. It's kind of off the...
Mm-hmm.
And where do you think that came from?
Well, when you ask the question, I envision myself in high school again, back on that stage, making people laugh.
Yeah.
I like being the center of attention,
Mm-hmm.
right? I like the drama of life. So I think in some ways that was an addiction, and I think I bore easily. So there was excitement around making dramatic choices, but there was also a belief that I could do them well and could manage them. And I've been a list keeper most of my life, back to childhood, and so I had a belief that if I was doing 1,000 positive things for somebody, that if I did something crappy, that would be considered. And when I did something crappy enough that none of that mattered, that was very confusing to me. But I've made your life so much better. So I actually believed that I was entitled and deserved people's trust, because I was a good people pleaser. I did have a positive impact on a lot of people. I helped creative people. I've always intuitively helped creative people exceed their own expectations of themselves. And I love doing that. I like being that person who, when they work with, they are proud of themselves for what they were able to manifest. But I believed that it entitled me to certain things, that the universe was gave me a real 2x4 to the head of a lesson around that I didn't learn the first time, didn't learn the second. Well, to some degree learned the second time, but then I was so bitter, back to kind of the downward spiral in LA. The third film project that I took on was a story of a woman who had been a prima ballerina, and a car accident wrecked her future. And she had gained a lot of weight, and she was mad at the world. And we were going to tell her story, and we were going to tell it in a way that there was no resolution. So the audience was left feeling the worst of the film, and we screened that in front of a few hundred people, and it was such a horrifying experience for me to recognize what I had done, that I said it was so important that I did it, because I have ever since, I've always, it gave me such a firm boundary of what I was no longer willing to do. The world is rough enough. I don't need to create things that shove that in people's face. I want to be part of things that are positive. But that was an expression of my bitterness, right? And it took me experimenting with what does that look like in its biggest form that I can create, in order for me to really look in the mirror and see where I was.
That's good. I'm thinking a little bit about your journey out in LA. You took this spiral, but I'm trying to connect it. It seemed like you started to get on the business side of things, and you mentioned you took a group to Mammoth. I'd like you to share what that was all about, and also just kind of like the behind the scenes stuff you started to do with these 3 films, where you weren't at the forefront anymore. You were like putting it all together. So where was that transition, and were you still in that spiral mode, or were you coming out of it?
It was, that was all within the spiral. I think maybe even, it started while things were still on an upward trajectory. So I in college, I had seen this PBS documentary about a guy named Harold Clurman. And it was a series that told stories about famous artists. And I didn't watch the whole series. I don't even know why I watched this one. I don't know who turned me on to it or what happened. But it was about this guy named Harold Clurman. Harold Clurman started the group theater in 1935 in New York that eventually became Broadway and then eventually became Hollywood. He worked with greats like Stella Adler and Elia Kazan and Clifford Odets, big playwrights and big actors of the time. And he thought of himself not as the best creative talent, but as the generator. And that meant he was responsible for bringing together the artists to speak about what was occurring in the world. He has a wonderful quote that I paraphrase a bit in saying, the truth is like castor oil. It's bitter and hard to swallow. People don't want it. So we open their mouths with laughter and then we pour it in. That has stuck with me since college. I feel like I've modeled my life after what I saw in that 45 minutes and who he was. I liked being the person who brought people together. I wanted to be that. And I also felt a tremendous responsibility because I learned at a young age how to open people up with laughter or various kinds of entertainment. But I had never been challenged with the question about what's our responsibility once they're opened. And because I'd never been questioned, I was pouring in Mountain Dew or McDonald's cheeseburgers, Miller beer, all the companies that I worked for in that regard. And there came a point where I recognized I have a greater responsibility. I don't just want to be a crayon in other people's crayon box. So I invited 8 other people who were in my acting class. I took a class at Playhouse West, which is a specific methodology, the Meisner methodology, which greatly impacted my trajectory. It's all about presence work. It's my college education was the Stanislavski method, which takes a script, tears it apart so you can put it back together every night. It's very analytical in its approach. When I went to Meisner training, Meisner throws that all away, and the entire focus is on being in this moment right here. And they strip away language so that we learned the program through repetition. And at the beginning, all you can make is a statement. You do it from your own perspective, but it starts with you're wearing a gray shirt, and the other person says, I'm wearing a gray shirt. Hey, you're wearing a gray shirt. Yeah, I'm wearing a gray shirt. And all you can do is repeat. And the journey that I found that we could go on with one another was so profound. It would stay with me for days. I could fall in love without language, right? I could get really worked up. I could get super turned on. I could get profoundly sad. And so that began, I think, my understanding of presence in an entirely different way. And so I invited 8 of my classmates to join me at Mammoth. I said, I'll pay for the cabin. If everyone will kick in for food, then we'll set up a schedule for meals. Everyone will contribute, and let's learn how to tell stories together, and start to create our own pathway. I like putting that together. This one was mine, right? This was not like I manifested this without. It was I created the invitation this time. I like that standout. That feels good.
That's good.
So initially I had invited 9 people. 8 of them came. And we ended up calling ourselves Elevation 9,000 Films because we were up in the mountains at Mammoth. It's not quite an elevation of 9,000, but there were 9 of us. Cute play on words.
Yeah.
And by the end of that experience, we had a number of scripts that were in process, and one that we really felt like we should do something with, and we did. And we ended up, we shot that film, and then it fell apart.
That was the first film.
Yeah.
That you that you were referencing before.
Yes.
Yeah.
First time I was producing.
Yeah.
Right? Full on producer, like I produced
How
that
old were
Mammoth
you?
event. That would have been the year 2000, so I would have been 26.
Okay, 26. Now, I have no perspective on this. Are there other 26-year-olds doing this sort of thing, that go out to be an actor and end up coming up with an idea to produce and actually raise money and
I think there are. I mean,
Yeah.
there are so many people that are producing stuff out there. At our school, at Playhouse West, we were at the time, we were celebrated for being the first ones to do it to the level that we did. Shooting it on 35 millimeter film, which was expensive, getting the professional crew together. Like Playhouse West at the time was starting to do an annual film festival for their students, but it was all digital, cheap looking, much more focus on performance than on production value. And we were trying to focus on both. And that was a very exciting experience because we were still a group when we premiered it at Playhouse West. So the 9 of us were heroes. Like we really got to revel in what we had done together before it fell apart. So yeah, that was. But I mean, yes, I think there are plenty of people. Like the director of that first film was I think 21. You know, so in some ways I was the
Who gives you
elder
money
of
for
the group.
something like that?
I mean, we went out to friends and family.
Yeah.
You know, one of the producers came from a rather affluent family in Houston.
Okay.
And so she kicked in a bunch. But it was a lot of pulling things together. We did a fundraiser, like, you know, raffling dates with people. Like you do whatever you got to do. I think for that first one, we raised like 35 grand for a 15-minute film.
Okay.
Right. So we were asking a lot of favors. We're getting a lot of stuff for free. This professional crew, nobody. I can think we paid the cinematographer $1,000, and this is a guy who makes $600 a day working in television, and he did a whole bunch of pre-production and shot with us for a very small amount of money.
In the work that you did while you were out there, some of it, from what I read, was good stuff. I mean, you received some awards and in the different things that you were successful.
Yeah. That first film we put out was called The Boy Scout. We won a number of film festivals with it. At the beginning, when we first put it out, we were still a group, and then unfortunately we fell apart. So there was far less marketing of it, and that's the sad. You know, the eventually the pain that manifested through these grenades that essentially I self-inflicted was to love something so much. And then to have a group of people who no longer wanted to have anything to do with it. The excitement of being 9 people who might travel around to film festivals and be the talk of a festival, because we're a lot of people, we carry a lot of energy. That was an exciting proposition. So when that exploded, the director became the one who really kept moving it forward, but he was a single person, you know, maybe with 1 or 2 smaller support mechanisms. Yeah. But we did, you know, for time we won some stuff with that. The second one we put out, we won some awards with that. So we got some attention, but I inflicted enough damage that eventually those died. I mean, the second one we did is very much like what's the show with Kimmy Schmidt? It's a television show that's done very well. That's very animated. It's real time, you know, people acting the parts, but it's very colorful and musical. And I mean, that's very similar to this musical comedy that we created. And we were excited to shop it around and figure out, is this supposed to be a children's program? What is this? And then this, you know, I betrayed trust and it went on a shelf.
Wow. Interesting. So once that, kind of after that third project, did you still stay out there, or is this at some point, when did you get back here?
So that was 2003. 2003 was the musical comedy. So 2004, 2005 was the bitter piece. And I came back to the Chicago area in 2006. Got married the end of 2005, and at the time, we thought my wife was going to come out to LA, and we got married, and she realized her identity was really wrapped up in Chicago. And by that time, I didn't feel called to stay. I was, you know, if I got an audition to go out for a commercial or a television show, it was getting in the way of the producing and directing I was really starting to enjoy until it got to the bitter point. So I bittered on going out on auditions, and came to a certain point where I was like, you know what? A younger kid would die for these opportunities, and I'm just being pissy about them, so I should probably give this up. And so I gave that up, and then eventually I did after we got married, I did a month back and forth for 6 months and then came back full time.
And you knew your wife in high school?
Knew her in high school, and then we didn't talk for 10 years after that, and got reacquainted. She saw my Mountain Dew commercial, didn't know I was in LA or an actor, and got in touch with me after that.
And then you did like a long distance dating?
Yeah, I brought her out to LA a number of times. I came back to Chicago a little bit, but usually she would come out to visit me, and our romance flourished.
And was she the one, I thought you said at some point, where, we're smoking the pot, and so at that point, that was the end of that for you?
Yeah, I quit cold turkey. I quit cigarettes that day too. Like it all ended for me that day. Like all I needed was someone to care enough. I think it was, they talk about the cry for help. Like I think I was in that position, and someone showed up who said, "I love you enough to hold you accountable to being better," and I was just done.
What year did you start RTC?
RTC informally started in 2005, and formally I incorporated it in 2006.
Okay. And I mean, just this whole progression that turned you into an entrepreneur. Do you ever think about that much? I mean, I'm thinking about your experience at Taco Bell when, you were working the 2%. That was a business mind at that point.
It was a hacker mind too.
Yeah.
I got turned on to that by a hacker. He was like, "You're describing all of our childhoods in the hacker community." And he was actually the first one to help me recognize that I actually didn't feel guilty about what I did. I felt clever. I didn't know that until I met someone who also felt clever.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
But then even in Portland, you're helping this old Jewish guy with the delicatessen, and you're helping him figure out where he's getting scammed on his books. And now you're out, and I could be wrong, but I feel like a lot of actors or actresses might be out there just excited to be in the best Mountain Dew or the Super Bowl Mountain Dew, but you're thinking, am I getting scammed on this? I better watch the contract. What about, I heard it got played in such and we're not getting paid for that. And that, to me, this is all like a business mind. Yeah, you've got that creativity, and then you kind of start producing, and that's a business mind too, all the numbers behind that, raising money, and you end up starting this company. It's really interesting journey to get you there.
Yeah, right. It was a very non-strategic following.
It was very strategic. You were following the Yellow Brick Road.
It was strategic without conscious strategery.
Maybe they should teach that.
Maybe they should.
Sometimes
Absolutely.
there's too much strategy.
I don't disagree. Like, I mean, well, that's interesting you bring that up, because for the first 7 or 8 years of RTC, I actually think I was overly strategic, and all I saw were the goals that I would set for myself. So I got real closed in on that. And then there came a point later in the company, around 2014, only 4 or 5 years ago now, when I had an experience that kind of ripped that away, and I realized how much I had been missing. I was proficient in attacking my goals, but I was missing all the opportunities that the universe was trying to get me to pay attention to. And that was a profound shift for me, for sure. Huge change.
So when you started it, what was its purpose? And then you had this laser focus, is what I'm taking away from what you just said. You were just like heads down, laser focused.
Initially, it was a means to an end. I needed to create some stability financially. I was getting married, and
so you started a business?
Well,
I'm trying to figure that one out.
It was you could say like an accidental attempt to some degree. So I was on Craigslist, right, which was popular at the time, and not full of spammers. And I was getting writing work, but I would find that most of the stuff that was available, where people were looking for good writers, I couldn't do. I didn't have the expertise. And yet, on another part of Craigslist were all these writers looking for work, and I felt like I understood the artist and I understood the business person's expectations, and I could be a conduit for that. I never wanted to just be a broker. I always wanted to have a role. And so I started finding writers who had certain talent that I liked, and then I would go out and find work for them. And I would keep 50% of the revenue, but I would stay involved, and I'd help the writer exceed what they thought they could do, and the business person, I helped exceed what they thought was possible to be delivered. And it was making money. It was making pretty decent money. And yet I didn't like most of the functions. So I would continually take profit and use it to replace myself. Thankfully, this was all transactional work. I talk about it, I say ebooks on foot fungus, and small magazine articles on 5 reasons dark chocolate is healthy for you. Like I could give a crap about any of that. But it was profitable, and everyone seemed happy in the equation. Writers loved me because they didn't like finding the work, they didn't like dealing with the invoicing, they didn't want to chase money to get paid. I paid very quickly for everything, and I found them the work, and I handled the business aspect so they could focus on just doing the thing they loved, which was the writing. And business people loved me because if there was a problem, it was my problem, not their problem, right? So that was all working, but I had no passion for it because it was not in my wheelhouse of excitement. But thankfully, because of my time in LA, I got involved in 2 projects very quickly that were book projects. And one of them was a hero's journey that was going to be a piece of fiction. A high-level executive coach wanted to tell the hero's journey of the CEO, the typical CEO that she would support. She wanted to share that journey, and she was willing to really open up. And another gentleman wanted to tell his story, another Latino guy who had not graduated from high school, but worked his way up after the military, worked his way up through business, became VP of a publicly traded company, and then started his own company. He thought his story might inspire some young Latinos. So I started working on those 2 and got super addicted to book writing. It was feeding me the way that LA fed me, but it was so much less expensive to have an impact on people's lives. And there was less chance of things sitting on a shelf, right? And even if stuff blew up, I thought there'd be less chance of it sitting on a shelf. That first project with the executive coach blew up when her book was complete. She loved the journey, was in love with her book, went out to a vanity publisher to get it published, and had a horrific experience that just crushed her soul. And she wanted nothing to do with that book for a long time after that. And that experience was actually what pushed us to start the publishing division. We're like, we don't have the distribution, we don't have the expertise, but we can ensure that people at least are treated respectfully. Like they put an intern in charge of her project and didn't tell her. She got terrible treatment, terrible communication. It was a super bad experience. So all of that to say that we started off as a very transactional company, and then thankfully I got pulled into storytelling and became super addicted to that. And then for years we just attracted more of those people, and I had to learn from a business perspective, how do I grow? I can't do all this work anymore, so I got to start building a team. I got to figure out how to play all the roles and then replace myself in each of them and actually grow this into something.
Yeah.
And that was
Did you know that intuitively, or?
I didn't learn it anyway. I didn't take a class. I didn't.
Yeah. Okay.
And I wasn't much of a. Like, if I was reading books, I was reading books like what we were creating, which were much more emotional than practical.
Well, you've said it on many occasions where you keep saying, I need to replace myself. I needed to replace myself. And, there's plenty out there about that, but it sounds like you just had that inside of you. You just knew.
Boredom.
I can't be doing that.
Boredom.
Yeah.
I do not enjoy this. I got to get it off my plate. It's killing my spirit. I can find someone who loves this. I'll find that person, try to replace myself so that I can do the thing that I'm obviously. I get pulled energetically on very easily, and it's been a good thing in many ways.
Yeah.
Until it's a bad thing, but. But it was a good thing through those years to continually.
How many years were you going until you realized the excitement for the books, for doing the books?
The first book project I got was in 2006 when we had just formally incorporated. So
right away.
Very quickly, thankfully.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you became a way for them to tell their story and then publish it and have a good experience around that, as opposed to what happened to this woman. Did she ever get her book out there?
She did through us.
Oh, she ended up doing it.
She did through us.
Okay.
Now, at the time, we didn't have a whole lot of capability in terms of getting a book out there. And to be honest, we still don't. That's not our forte. Our forte is in ensuring someone has a phenomenal experience and creating a phenomenal product with super high standards, but it's still on the author in our model to do their outreach, because we attract a lot of people who don't necessarily have a national platform yet. So they're using this to actually create platform.
Yep.
And as a publisher, it doesn't make sense to make big investments when my clients, for the most part, our authors, they're generating their ROI from new clients, new business opportunities, not from books sold. Right? They're giving away more books than they are selling.
Right.
It's just that's the thought leadership world that we tend to play in, and that may continue to change. But we went with a traditional publishing model for a short period of time, got hammered with a lot of lessons and wasted a lot of resources. And it was probably important for us to do that so we know how that works, but it's a broken model and I don't care to participate in it if I can avoid it.
So the self-publishing model, I guess, is that fair to say what it would be?
So it's the traditional self-publishing model. An author who's going to self-publish has to hire all kinds of different vendors, manage all that themselves. So we're not quite, that's not us. Like, we're a single point and we handle everything soup to nuts for them.
Yeah.
With a whole creative team who actually reads their book, right, before we design. Everything's custom. So it is sometimes it's called partnership publishing. There are groups called vanity presses out there. Most people who go to a vanity press go for a different reason than they come to us. A lot of people, it's called a vanity press because it's about vanity.
Right.
So a lot of people who maybe go to a traditional vanity press, they want to be recognized as a published author. I don't know to what degree they really want people to read their book or not. I'm sure plenty of them do. But I don't know the degree to which the quality is being upheld. Like, we're so high on quality, and it's just a different experience, I believe, with us. But it's still, we still fall within that realm in terms of the industry vernacular. There's no real name for exactly what it is that we do. We're a partner in this for sure. They are putting up some of the expense for us to surround them with these standards and to produce this. And we share in the return on investment of books sold, but it's not the priority in terms of their return.
Do you look at that as it's evolved since, say, 2006, since you kind of started that part of your business? Have you seen the competitive environment get?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Is it? What's it like now?
We've never felt like we had direct competition because so much of the industry really doesn't necessarily, in my experience, give a crap about the author. It's numbers, it's volume. In the beginning, when we first started this, it was a lot of masked marketing in the sense of when you work with us, there's no upfront cost, but you're going to pay, you have to commit to buying 5,000 books. So no upfront cost becomes 20 grand. Right, so it was it was a dirty industry in many regards, and I think we were trying to do that as cleanly and upfront as possible, and making sure people understood what they were getting. We were trying to offer a great royalty and a lower cost for people who wanted to give away books, and really try to take care of our people. It is slightly more competitive now. But we really only feel like we have one direct competitor who cares to the level that we believe that we do, who has similar price points for the way that they support. They're a different model, though.
Okay.
And we tend to treat them as an ally. Like we've actually sent each other customers.
Okay.
Because we tend to approach things relatively differently. Someone who knows what they want going into it is not great for us. We're not just an execution partner. We create something that's evolving. So we send those people to them. They do that really well. Typically, when they have someone who comes to them that doesn't quite know what they want yet, it breaks their system down, so they'll send them to us. That might be changing. We might be more competitive, as we're continuing down this path. But But for the most part, that's the only person I've seen that I feel like is actually direct competition.
Are you getting to the point, or are you in the place where you enjoy what you're doing?
Oh, I've loved what we're doing for a long time.
But I mean, as far as your role. So you were saying, I don't want to do that, and I shouldn't be doing that. That doesn't give me energy. Are you doing the things that give you energy now?
Yeah, I've been in that place for quite a while now.
Quite
too.
a while, yeah.
Yeah, no, it continues to fluctuate.
Mm-hmm.
It still needs to change. I still get bored,
Mm-hmm.
right? So mostly what I need is a solid enough team that I can continue to evolve, because as I evolve, we attract better customers.
Mm-hmm.
We're using the EOS model now. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
We just adopted it.
Mm-hmm.
We're in like our 5th or 6th month.
Great.
Revolutionized us already.
Wow.
Revolutionized us after 30 days. Like, we were 12 years old at that time.
Yeah.
Right? And such a creative company with a lot of fluidity and a very confluent culture. And not a lot of, like, I didn't know foundational business principles, so we've been lacking them for a long time. And it's really gotten in our way. Like, we've been succeeding despite ourselves for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And I promoted Kristen Westberg in our company to president. It must be almost 3 years ago now. And what she's been wanting from me, I've never been able to give her. And at the end of our first day with our EOS implementer, I was like, this is the thing you've been asking for and I've never been able to give you. She's a football coach's daughter. She knows how to run plays, and I don't have a playbook. Uh-huh. But we do now.
Yeah. Oh,
she's thriving. She's just phenomenal.
This is going to be an interesting part of the next phase of your journey, for sure. Yeah.
It already is fascinating.
Okay. Wow. And so what do you spend your time doing? I mean, I know you've done workshops that I've participated in. Is that part of what you're doing? Or?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I give a lot of time to conscious capitalism. Mm-hmm. I'm giving more and more time to small giants. Mm-hmm. We were just on the phone with Hamza a week and a half ago about sponsoring the next event in Detroit.
Great.
And we're going to bring a vulnerability wall.
Okay, fantastic.
You're the first one to know.
I won't say a word. But if this goes out, is that a problem?
No, I don't think so. And so my role is a multitude of things. I do still handle a fair amount of our legal. I pay attention to our legal stuff. We have a conscious attorney that we work with that's really phenomenal, but I still have my eyes on legal stuff as our company evolves and we change contracts and stuff like that. And I do our big relationships. I mean, visionary stuff.
Yeah.
And I am our ambassador. So going out and creating experiences that invite people to feel seen is what I spend as much time doing as I can. And that's leading workshops, facilitations, Gestalt work with groups, keynotes, all that. That's in service to the audience, to create really, I'm a believer, like, if I'm going to be on stage, I have to create, my job is to create a profound moment for a group. And so, and if I do that, the people who enjoy feeling seen then tend to ask, who the hell are you that you did that? And what do you guys do? And then if they're right for us, then then we're in a conversation about how our company can support them. So it is a part of our marketing for sure, but it's also it is the integration of who I used to be as a performer and who I am now as a business person. Mm-hmm. And I've been on that integration path since 2014 when I intersected with conscious capitalism for the first time.
So what's your relationship with money as it relates to the business?
So I, that's a good one. I've thought about this at many points. I'm evaluating where am I at today? There was a period of time where we removed me from financial conversations because it wasn't healthy for me to be involved. there was a period, like I had to be real careful of my deserving, entitled attitude so that I wasn't taking advantage when it was available. And so for a period of time, we removed me because I felt dangerous. Or I felt like I could be unfair. And that's been helpful. And I've worked, over the past 3 years, I've done a tremendous amount of work on myself. And so those are, I meet those conversations very differently now. So Kristen owns our P&L, but I'm still involved in certain conversations for sure. But overall, I do have an abundance mentality. I believe in first focusing on what is right, and then working to balance that with smart financial decisions. But that's hard for me. Like right now, we discovered at the end of last year that my parents have been living paycheck to paycheck. I didn't realize that even though my dad worked for me. We're a family that doesn't talk about money. And so it was not discussed until my dad got really ill and my wife and I started getting involved. And I kept him on at the company even though he couldn't work for us for about 9 months. And we realized at a certain point he was not going to be able to come back. And that without support, like they had his Social Security, but my mother worked under the table when she was young and had very little Social Security. So they don't have a lot of support. So my wife and I have taken on that role. And I'm in the process right now of trying to determine the level of responsibility that I want to have, that we want to have, and what is the loving level of responsibility. Is it actually, like, because right now we enable my parents to not learn some lessons that the universe might be trying to teach them, right? And yet being the one to parent them and set certain financial limitations is hard for me. So I'm in the process of unpacking all of that and really trying to be healthier about how we do that while also wanting to feel good about how we support them. But right now we're, my wife's a psychologist. She's worked for 16 years at the same school. That administration had some changes that she wasn't comfortable with. She left, and she hasn't worked now for almost a year.
Wow. So
we're a single income family, and for years with RTC, I've always taken profit and just continue to pour it back into the business. So I'm taking more than I ever have before, and the company's fine. We're doing great. Like, I'm thankful for that.
Yes.
And at the same time, because of the amount that we're giving my parents, we're like a break-even household right now. So we're not really saving for the future the way that I'd like to. So I have to contend with not sacrificing myself, right, in my future for my abundance mentality today. And that's not easy for me. Like I said, there's so many factors that play in. I get so much reward. Like, we take a lot of care of my parents, not just financially, but physically. They're 15 minutes away from us. My mom falls and I'm in the car and we're going over there, and so we do a tremendous amount for them. And I get a lot of reward in the relationship. I get a tremendous amount by being in the hard conversations with my parents and forcing me to change and learn and be less of a people pleaser in a relationship that needs me to be less of a people pleaser. Like, these are big, this is part of my hero's journey. I think my coach actually challenged me and said, maybe making decisions without pleasing people is a big part of your call to adventure right now. And it's like you take that filter off and nothing makes sense to me. So I'm having to learn, and it's rather painful.
It's like full circle to the recording you're listening to.
I mean, you can imagine why it's impacting me.
Well, it's very well articulated, I have to tell you.
Thank you.
I'm thinking to myself, this is somebody who's thinking about stuff. And I'm also thinking, what's it like to be in a household with you and a psychologist in your wife? And what are those conversations like?
I mean, she went through the Gestalt program with me.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
We did that 18-month program together.
Okay.
And it saved our relationship. I mean, we were at a tough spot before that because I felt like I had been doing so much personal development work, and she was doing triage all day with kids and parents,
Yeah.
right? And I was coming home at the end of the day with an overflowing well, and she was empty, right?
Yeah.
So doing that work together was a really profound shift in our relationship, in our understanding of each other, our communication style. When we're very playful too, though, and we can get really silly, and we have this thing like we let each other know like we're having a nonsense conversation right now, like because we'll just devolve into stupidness. It's a really cute part of our relationship, and yet it can be an avoidance mechanism that we use, right? So when we have the deeper conversations, they're really beautiful. I'm very grateful for them, and they're not always accessible to us.
Sure.
Just because of life is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a journey this all is for you. You came up with some, I want to say, values. I'm not sure if it's the right word I'm looking for. A couple very strong connectors for you in life recently.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what they are?
I'm assuming you're speaking of love and brilliance.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Can you share, like, how did that process come about, and what does that all mean to you?
It's actually even shifted recently through EOS. Our implementer challenged us to really ask, are these the appropriate values? And they still are. What we did is we shifted. Love is our overall filter, but our 4 values are LOVE: lean into learning, own it, vulnerability, and elevate to brilliance. And but love and brilliance have been what I've referred to as guiding principles for a few years now. Love, my interpretation is around how a relationship, how are we with one another, how do we meet one another. Striving for 100% presence with one another is a loving act, right? So we really strive for that a lot in our business. Brilliance, speaking to our output. What are we doing as an organization to set up the conditions where brilliance is possible? Because brilliance is something that's arrived at in our work. It's not a starting point. It's not an overnight thing. It's an evolution that's required in order to.
I like the way you frame that, because when you originally said that brilliance, I thought, wow, that's a high standard.
It's magic.
Yeah.
It's an intangible thing that hits you in an embodied way. And you know it when it's there, and when it's not, we can make excuses for why it's not, or we can make excuses that it's good enough, right? So we pay a lot of attention to what are the factors that are required for brilliance to be a possibility. High trust, right? A learning environment. If you got a bunch of knowers standing around, like they're not going to elevate to brilliance. And momentum is a real key in our process. So there are some. So our old values, of which love and brilliance were our 2 primary.
Yeah.
They've all still got a role in this kind of articulation of these new 4. But the love one, is really been pretty profound in my life. It's been an access point for more grace, which I needed. I was more volatile, and that entitled, version of me might show up. I emotionally vomited on other people when I wasn't happy with decisions that people might make. I would not show up in a loving manner. When I was stressed out, I felt like everyone should be stressed out, and what a great place from which to solve challenges, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
Learning how to flip that, was a multi-year process for me, but it was life-giving.
Is that around about the time you have a tattoo on your arm that says love?
Yeah.
Is that when you got the tattoo?
Yeah, that was. It was all part of a period of transition. In 2014, actually, it was the end of 2013, I believe, is when I got the tattoo.
And I just want to say, that's a commitment tattoo, the way I see it.
Yeah.
Like that's at the forefront on the forearm, right? It's there.
I had been looking for a tattoo for 2 years. I knew I wanted one on my forearm.
You did.
I didn't know what it was, so I was seriously looking, and nothing fit the bill. And I felt like it was going to be a flag in the ground at a very subconscious level. Like I didn't know what I wanted, but we adopted love as a core value at the end of 2013, and our creative director, Sunny,
Can you show it just so people can see it?
She sent me this image, and as soon as I saw it, I was like, that's it. And I went to Sunny and I said, do you mind if I put this on my body?
It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
It really is.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Are you happy?
With the tattoo?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, you're glad you have it.
Oh yeah.
Do you do something with it?
Yeah.
You know, consciously, like look at it each day and contemplate, or?
Not to that degree anymore, but it was integral for a period of time. It was, it was important that I put it in my face. I have a really crappy tattoo on my shoulder that I honestly don't even know which shoulder it's on. I usually get it wrong. It's like, choose between two grocery lines. I'm not going to know that either, but I don't know where this is because it's not in my face, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted this to be something that I was forced to look at. Interestingly, though, right, it's directed outward. It's upside down to me.
Yeah.
And so maybe to some degree, like it requires me to think as I look at it. But I got it around it. So the first, those relationships that I blew up in those early iterations of my companies, the lesson that I took away, which I don't believe was the ultimate lesson that I would learn, but the lesson for the time was, I cannot be trusted with women that I work with. And I was getting married, right? So I was like, okay, well, I don't want to blow up my marriage or my next company. RTC was the third iteration of a storytelling company I was creating, and it was starting to work, right? So I didn't want to muck it up. And yet there came a point where, so essentially what I did was I built walls around myself. I knew that if I let myself get too close, that I could not be trusted with the decisions that I would make. So therefore, I built a wall so I couldn't get too close. And then in 2013, Katie, our executive editor at the time, she's a brilliant writer, like moves me with anything that she creates, and brilliant editor. And she was just doing phenomenal work for the company in terms of brilliance. Like she could get there. And yet Katie had a delivery issue. Deadlines were her enemy. And we did not, as a company, know how to manage that and support her. And what would happen was she would be late on things, but when they'd get delivered, they were just so unbelievable that she'd get away with it, right? And there came a point where it was starting to cause problems and clients were getting upset. And we couldn't quite get away with it anymore the way we could before. And unfortunately, what I did, because the story I was telling was that it was a reflection of me. I painted her with a brush that essentially said, this small piece, this small challenge that you have is who you are. And I made her feel terrible. And I attacked her in a moment that was not deserved. And I felt so small afterwards. Like I was devastated by what I was incredibly unkind, brought her to tears. And this was on a leadership team retreat with like 6 of us. And I sat up against the corner of a couch, much like I am now. She was out in the backyard. She had left, and Dave on our team at the time, who was kind of our COO, mediated some conversation. And in that conversation, it was probably one of the most vulnerable conversations I've ever had. In that conversation, I admitted that I had feelings. In my head, this is my recollection of it. I don't know what the exact, but in my recollection, I had feelings for Katie. Katie didn't even think I liked her because of that wall, right? I had feelings for Katie that I needed to protect all of us from. So that was my coldness. But the team challenged me by saying, essentially, you're not that person that you were when you built this wall. And we need to challenge you to take it down because it's causing you to be unkind to people. And I learned a lot during that experience. One thing I learned was that if my life at home is really good and my relationship with my wife is really good, I don't have feelings in the creative process for other people. I can separate that. When things are not great at home, right, then I start to mistake that. So that was one of the big learnings that came from that.
Yeah.
I started taking down that wall, and it was actually that same trip. Everyone else left. I stayed for 2 more days, and I got this tattoo. And I don't know that I correlated at the time, because we had planned to get this tattoo. I don't know that I correlated at the time, but I was trying to put this front and center in my face on a daily basis, because if I was going to put this on my damn arm and not live it, it was, I mean, the universe was going to let me know, right? I mean, when I first got it, I thought, like, I'll cover this up most of the time. I really believed that it was something I showed selectively. I was like, I'm going to wear a lot of long sleeves for a while.
Yeah.
It didn't turn out that way. Very quickly, like, I found that it was, it helped me make better decisions.
Wow. It's a great story.
Thank you.
What's the origin of the vulnerability cards? And these are these cards that you can use in a workshop or a team building, and we use them at our company all the time. They're the greatest.
That's awesome.
So
I just got a note from someone yesterday who used it with their father who was dying of cancer.
Oh, wow.
And they were spending time with their father and sister. And they said that everyone was on their phones, and they pulled out the game and got into some real conversation that was just deep, and it was beautiful. So the initially vulnerability is sexy. Vulnerability has always been a part of our process, and we recognized, I want to say 2011, 2012, what a prominent role it played in building trust with our clients and in sharing their stories. They had to feel safe to be more vulnerable versions of themselves. And we found through our year-long book development process that where people, what they were able to be vulnerable about at the beginning, and then 3 months, and then 6 months, and then 9 months, it was an ever deepening process. And always, it seemed so beautiful, and we were always so grateful for the trust and where we were able to get people to the point where they could get that vulnerable and then share it with the world in a book. And eventually, come 2014, when I had been head down in the business, in 2014 I popped out and went to my first business conference, Conscious Capitalism CEO Summit. That a client was like, "Don't ask any questions, pay your $5,000 and go." And I was like, "Okay." And I went, and at the end of that, at the beginning of that experience, I'm like, "What the hell am I doing here?" Totally freaked out. At the end of that experience, I felt like I knew exactly why I was there. I was meant to serve this community in some capacity.
Yellow Brick Road.
Yellow Brick Road. I was like, I'm supposed to be on that stage a year from now, which is completely unreasonable for me to think.
Yeah.
But I'm supposed to serve this community. This community needs something that's intuitive to me and that a lot of them are trying to figure out. Meanwhile, I don't know business for shit. Like, I'm just making it up as I go. They all know, they've invested heavily in their mental capacity and their business acumen. And I'm a theater guy. I come from make-believe. So at the end of that experience, I had this recognition of kind of this calling that I had. And I totally just lost track of why I'm telling that story. There was a lead-in for why I was mentioning conscious capitalism.
To go on the stage? To end up on the stage?
I mean, that was certainly a part of my, it was the beginning of my integration towards wholeness. But previously I was talking about taking the walls down and the love tattoo. You asked me a great question. I don't know, I lost my thread. So, something I'll pick up. Maybe that means I'm just supposed to be more quiet. A lot of talking.
It's good. This is what normally happens, right? Is we'll start talking and then so just jump in when it hits you. But where I thought you were going was, you've taken the yellow brick road because your friend said, "Do this, pay your $5,000 and get down to this, and you did it. You just did it, and you didn't feel like worthy, so to speak, in some sense. Like you didn't have business acumen, which you totally did. You had a story in your head, right?
Sure, totally. Yeah.
And you're there, and it's all connecting. By the end, it's just all connecting. You found something that really made sense to you, and you're seeing this up on the stage, and you're thinking to yourself, I need to be on that stage next year.
It was an awakening of my sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Like, it was a new articulation of purpose that I
Yeah.
felt. And a stripping away of the blinders, right? Like, I had followed an opportunity that was not in my strategy.
Yeah.
And look what came available.
Yeah.
So it was, that was a wonderful.
And did that play a part in the cards?
That's where you were going. So at Conscious Capitalism, thank you for that. What I did recognize in that 2.5 day experience was that it seemed like most people were not really that comfortable being there until it was time to go. I knew that as much of head games as I was playing and hierarchy stuff as I was doing in my head,
Yeah.
Measuring against other people
Yeah.
and this and that's the intuitive nature of human beings. Like, how many of us are doing that? And it begged the question, is there some way, some iteration of our process that we could bring into an event that helped people feel more connected in their humanity, closer to the beginning, so that they took bigger risks during that time that they were together? And our answer to that was this art installation, this vulnerability wall. And we threw vulnerability as sexy up on the banner. And it had been we had unearthed vulnerability as sexy and threw it on a business card. And every time people saw it, like, we got reactions. So we threw it on t-shirts and then, right. But this was the next iteration was the wall. And the wall was just like, people were magnetized to it, profoundly impacted. The things that our very first wall, we just asked people, what do you feel vulnerable about as you're entering this conference space? And the submissions that we got were just, who am I to put my plate down next to these people? My leadership style intimidates my husband, and I'm concerned for my marriage. I lost my business, right? And we had a wall, like, with 80 of these entries. And they're anonymous, so people were submitting them anonymously. They dropped them in this box, and then our artists would take their entry and depict it artfully up there. So without realizing what we were doing, we were creating these collision moments for people where something they felt shame about or guilt about or some kind of shadow or negativity was now being reflected back to them as a piece of their beauty. And it was a moment of, like, a choiceful moment, a very subconscious choice of, like, which story do I want to move forward with, right? And then in taking in the whole and knowing that every contribution up on an art installation came from a member in the room, it was also a representation of us, of the community. And that was so wonderfully impactful, but it's expensive, costs, $5-7 to send all the materials and the artists across the country. We always fly artists around, and it's not an inexpensive thing to create. And so that begged the question, what's an inexpensive version of this? And that was how the game was born.
That's amazing. And the cards have done well.
They do all right. I mean, we're not a game company.
Yeah.
Right. So they do fine. We ship them out regularly, but we've also never, like, really fiercely marketed them. It's not a top priority for us. It is. It's something we're well known for within certain communities, you could say.
Yeah.
And we use it. We use it with our facilitations.
Yep.
Right, as a way to get deep quickly, so that then we can do other things. And I love it for that reason. And we've played together doing that.
I love the three sort of categories. And so sometimes we'll start a meeting and we'll say, all right, what are we up for today? You want to get vulnerable? And there's always a group that's like, no, dude, I don't want to do a vulnerable one today. Can we just do an easy one, right?
That's awesome.
So, but what I did do is I asked my team to just throw out a few that they were interested in that I could ask you. And one you already brought up on your own, which was, what is your relationship with money? So I'm not going to ask you about that.
Okay.
But how do you hope to be remembered?
Oh. I see Harold Clurman's face when you ask the question.
the PBS special.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I hope
wow.
to be remembered as somebody who brought people together to move a conversation forward that needed to be moved in one way or another. And we do that in our work all over the place. I think I've already, in many ways, achieved that. I think it's just a matter of, that desire to impact more lives and grow the ripple and touch more people in that way. But yeah, I would feel, if that's what I'm here for, that's what I'm here for.
My sense is you're more than on that track. You really are.
That's very kind.
So it's cool that you say that that's the track you're on, and the journey that you've been on is pretty remarkable. When you start to connect all the dots, and I think that one thing I really enjoy about speaking with you, and in the couple times that I've worked with you, is you're always thinking and growing. There's a self-awareness. And then you start to bring around that self-management piece too, which is the hard part, because, some people are self-aware, but they don't manage it very well. And, to me, that's what true emotional intelligence is all about. It's not just being self-aware, but it's about also being able to manage it. And so I see that in you, and I see this just one of the gifts. I don't know if you've ever been told this before, but I think one of the gifts that you're bringing to this world, and you've done it so many times just now while we've been talking, is just like what's going on in your life that's real. You're not putting up a barrier to show that something is more than, or whatever, what you want people to see, so to speak, so it all looks pretty and wrapped up in a bow. It's just, there's great things and there's challenging things. It's just life stuff that we're all going through together, the same stuff. And your wall does that too, but you're at the forefront of it. You show up and say, this is who I am and what I'm all about. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Did I miss anything?
I mean, we're just getting started, right?
I got, okay, part two?
Heartbeat. I learned so much being in conversations like this. It's like, as I said, I hadn't put together some of those pieces before, right? And about how I follow the path, and then the moments where I have set the path stand out much more strikingly. That's a big piece I'm taking away that I haven't articulated before.
Wow,
I appreciate that opportunity.
That's cool. I'm glad that came out.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love it.
Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for your wonderful questions. You really did your homework, and I appreciate that. And this is. I'm not ready for it to be done, which is a good sign.
Well, it's not, because I like to give a hug when we're done.
Oh, please.
You ready for that?
Thanks, Corey. Thank you.